message in the chat for everybody, so we'll see it.
There we go. Hello, folks. Welcome. Thank you for being here. This is our, what is it, February month for the Carolina Community Coalition. We are glad you are taking the time to join us today, and really excited about the speaker that we have. As folks are coming in, if you will go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, tell us who you are, what organization or department you are with. We'd love to hear more about that, and then we'll get started in just a minute. And don't forget to switch the chat to everyone so that everyone can see you introduce yourself and not just our panelists and hosts.
Amy, I had to do that myself. I usually will send us nice welcome message out, and it went to the panelists. You know, it's
right. Always. And I know that there are a lot of things happening on campus today, so we are excited to have you folks joining us, and also we'll be recording this to post on our YouTube channel later if you'd like to refer back or get some information. We will go ahead and get started. So housekeeping things, feel free to continue to chat with each other and introduce yourself and share information in the chat. I will put a couple of resources there as well. If you would like to ask a question, if you have a question for our presenter, please use our fancy Q&A. We are high up here, and we're technical in South Carolina, so you can use that Q&A function so that we don't miss your question as we're going through the presentation or at the end. And we've also got some polls, so we're excited for to be able to use all the features of Zoom today. Without further ado, I will do an introduction of our speaker. Let's see here. Okay. Rich Lucey has more than 3 decades of experience at the state and federal government levels, working to prevent alcohol and drug use and misuse among youth and young adults, especially college students. He currently serves as a senior prevention program manager in the Drug Enforcement Administration's Community Outreach and Prevention Support Section. Rich plans and executes educational and public information programs, evaluates program goals and outcomes, and serves as an advisor to the section chief and other DEA officials on drug misuse prevention and education programs. Rich formerly served as a special assistant to the director for the Federal Center for Substance Abuse Prevention and worked as an education program specialist in the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Safe and Drug-Free Schools. And he is the best presenter I think I've ever seen talk about the strategic prevention framework. And I'm real excited to be able to bring Rich to our coalition today. So thank you so much, Rich, for being here.
Thanks, Amy. I do appreciate it, and appreciate the kind introduction. Hi, everybody. I have a bit of an affinity for South Carolina. I have a sister who lives in Beaufort, so I have a connection there. It is 54 degrees here in the nation's capital. I don't think that matches what you have down there, but it's exciting to be with all of you as part of this presentation. And as Amy saying, my presentation skills, if you will, around the SPIF, I'm very passionate about this issue, and especially as it applies to preventing drug use among college students. And hopefully you'll kind of feel that coming through the screen as I do present. I do want to acknowledge a colleague of mine who is also dialed in. Wanda Wiggins is our community outreach specialist in DEA's Atlanta Field Division, which does include South Carolina. She's relatively new to the position, as are a lot of our community outreach specialists. We're working toward getting one in each of our 23 field divisions across the country. So this also is a good opportunity for for Wanda to hear about the subject matter and just to have another connection to stakeholders in her field division. So what I'm going to cover in the next hour, with leaving time for questions throughout and at the end, is what are the current trends around drug use among college students. Then I'm going to talk a bit about the current issue that really has changed the whole landscape of drug threats in America, which is fake pills and illicit fentanyl, and what DEA is doing about it. And then I will pivot to our resources for professionals who are working to prevent drug use and misuse among college students, which includes one of our flagship documents, our publication called Prevention with Purpose, the update of which was released just 2 weeks ago, so relatively hot off the press. So Amy's kind enough to drive my slides for me. So we're going to start right off with the data information. I think, no, we're not. We're going to do a polling question. That's right. Amy mentioned we've got a couple of polls for you. I understand that I am going to be the first presenter to use polling in your webinar feature. So we're going to try not to break it. But here's our first poll. Just where do you work? Do you work on a campus? Do you work in a community? Or do you work in a community but with a campus? Just try to get it always is helpful to get a pulse check of the room. And of course, if we were in person, I'd be asking the same question and seeing the show of hands. But if you want to just go ahead and select your option, I'm seeing at least results starting to pop in. So Amy, yay you. It's actually working.
So far,
and
so good.
We didn't break it.
Yes.
So that's a good thing. No. Oh, nice. So we are getting a preponderance of folks on in the webinar today who are working on campus. I definitely am very thankful that we have people who are also working directly in the community and collaborating with the campus. That's really important. And while the thrust of what I'll be talking about today, most of it is directly related to campuses, but around the issues of fake pills and illicit fentanyl, that is certainly affecting all other settings and sectors within the community as well. So based on the poll, Amy, we can probably shut it down at this point. Like I said, most of you in the call today are working on a campus with a few folks in the community sector and collaborating. So we really do appreciate that. So as I mentioned, we're going to go into the data slides. And I do think that that is important to really take a look at, the why, what we're doing, why we're doing what we're doing. One of my mantras is data drives programming, and you'll hear that again when I talk about the SPIF. So it really is important to take a look at the data. These data are coming from the most recent Monitoring the Future study. Hopefully that is a national study you've got your eyes on. As you know, it comes in 2 volumes. The first volume looks at drug use rates, including alcohol, among 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. And then the other volume looks at all older other adults, which includes a section on college students. So alcohol, I admit right up front, alcohol is not a controlled substance within the purview of DEA, but I can't do a presentation that talks about preventing drug use and misuse among college students without talking about the still #1 drug of choice among college students. So here's the data point, and here's what I want to point out to you. For as long as I've been in this field, and you heard it's 3 decades plus, that Amy had said, we have known that college students typically binge drink 5 or more drinks in a row for males, 4 or more for females, more than their peers who are not in college. That's been a traditional trend over time. And then there was an expectation, and sure enough, it occurred in 2020, the pandemic effect. You'll see there that the data points converged at right around 24%, when we know that just like everywhere else around the world, campuses had shut down in March or so, like everyone else, and students were going back to their home environment, whether that was with, a single parent, dual parent, or whatever situation, but they were coming off campus back to their home environments. And then that gap widened again. So the expectation was realized, and we see it right after, the rebound, if you will, after the pandemic in 2021. That gap widened again, showing that college students were binge drinking again more than their peers not in college. I guess the good news piece out of this slide is if you do look between 2021 and 2022, and there are going to be some points of good news in these slides that I show you, there was about a 3 percentage point drop in terms of binge drinking among college students, and that is a credit to all of you in this webinar, in addition to your peers around the country. So thanks for the work you're doing and continuing to do. The next couple of slides are going to be on marijuana. Oh, nope. First, I wanted high intensity drinking. I don't want to forget that. So if binge drinking wasn't bad enough, we are also focusing on high intensity drinking, which is 10 or more drinks in a row. So in 2021, it was about 1 in 10 college students. It's gone down to about 1 in 20. So that's excellent, but still seeing that 5% of college students in the past 2 weeks having drank 10 or more drinks in a row is quite alarming. And so that is something that we need to keep our eye on and to continue to focus on. I don't know how many of you have been able to attend a strategies conference that's sponsored by NASPA and actually co-sponsored by DEA. 2 weeks ago, it was in San Francisco. And as a matter of fact, Jason Kilmer, in his plenary presentation, talked about the connection between alcohol and drug use and suicide, mental health. I'm going to mention that in a slide as well. But it was interesting that among high intensity drinkers, the risk of suicide is about 90 times higher. And I particularly took a picture of that slide because I think that it's important for us to remember that connection between drug use and mental health issues. Okay, now we'll get into issues around marijuana. On the next slide, you're going to see, the marijuana use trends, or basically over the last decade, has shown an increase. Not a surprise with legalization that's been happening for personal non-medical use across the country. We saw a slight increase in the early 10s, a little dip in 17, then a significant jump up to 19. But again, let's focus in on what appears to be a bit of a good news portion of this. That number has decreased since 2018. It's still not great. 22% of college students currently past 30-day use of marijuana, cannabis, but that is showing a trend in the right direction. So that's good. The next slide is daily or near daily use of marijuana. And so in 2021, it was at 5.6%. Okay, we're seeing a slight decrease a year later. So about just under 5% of college students are currently using marijuana on a daily or a near daily basis. And that is defined as 20 or more days in the past 30 days. So that's basically what we're looking at when we're talking about daily or near daily use. The next slide around marijuana is focused in on a gender differential that I want to show you. So if you see over the last decade, typically college males have used marijuana in the past 30 days more than females. But there was a bit of a decrease in the early 10s for males and a bit of an increase for the females. Then we had a little bit of seesawing happening, increasing back up with males, decrease for females until 21, the 2 points converged. And now, a year later, the data show for 2022 that the college females have caught up, if you will, in terms of their current marijuana usage between, within the gender. So something we want to keep an eye on, certainly something to keep an eye on for your programming efforts. Hopefully you're doing surveys or doing some type of an assessment on your own campus to get that snapshot that's particular for your setting. And we'll talk, of course, about the importance of doing that when I mention the SPIF, the Strategic Prevention Framework, a little bit later. The next slide is hallucinogens. And in 2021, 7%, that was pretty high. In fact, the last couple of years, hallucinogen use was the highest it has been in the past year among college students in the 40 plus years of this survey being done. We know in prevention our work is never done. Sometimes it's like a bit of whack-a-mole. And, hallucinogens, it kind of caught me by surprise, admittedly, as I look at the data when it comes out each year, and I saw that, hallucinogen uh, use was at its highest rate in the past 40 years. And I thought, wow, really? That kind of came from out of left field. But a downtick. So again, a bit of good news. We'll keep an eye on this. The new data will come out later this summer, typically in the early part of August. And so that's when we'll get a look at the 2023 numbers. Remember, we're always about a year behind with our data lag. The next slide is stimulants. And here's what I want to focus in on: prescription drug misuse among college students. This data slide shows you the difference in past year non-prescription amphetamine use, stimulants among college students, a little higher among the college students. So among the general population, we know that the three classes of prescription drugs typically misused by the general public in order are opioids, sedatives, and stimulants. Among college students, that pretty much directly inverts. And so the class of prescription drugs typically misused by college students in order are stimulants, sedatives, opioids. And that's not to say that we don't have an opioid misuse issue on college campuses like we have generally over the past 15 plus years or so. Um, Not to overgeneralize too much, but if you think about the athletics department, for example, with sports injuries and pain management, that, typically might be where you would look to see the potential for opioid misuse, or by definition of misuse, diversion, with those prescribed medications going to others for whom they weren't prescribed. But let me just talk about the stimulants issue. There are plenty of surveys out there, including the one done at The Ohio State University, the National Prescription Drug Study, that shows stimulants as being the class of prescription drugs typically misused among college students. And we really do think it's because college students are under the misguided belief, and it's a phrase that I use carefully and intentionally, the misguided belief that's going to help them get a better grade if they do so. And there is no research, none, to show that the non-medical use of a prescription stimulant is going to get you a better grade. But you have what I call the N of one. It just takes one student who happens to take, say, an Addy or a Ritalin because they've got a test coming up the next day, and they get lucky enough to get a better grade. And next thing you know, they tell somebody who tells somebody, and it kind of spreads from there. When I worked at SAMHSA, it was a while ago now. It's hard to believe how time flies. I'll be at DEA 8 years this May. Prior to my time at DEA, I was the special assistant to the former director of CSAP, the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention at SAMHSA. In 2015, SAMHSA had issued a report. It was not anything that we were part of. It was the section of SAMHSA that administers the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, another national survey hopefully you're keeping your eyes on and you regularly check into. And they had issued a report that showed that on any given day, approximately 400 full-time college students will start or initiate the non-medical use of a prescription stimulant. But in the months of April, November, and December, that number goes to 500 college students on any given day. Now, the report didn't get into the why, but think about the 3 months that I just mentioned, April, November, and December, and what's happening during those months, midterms and finals, right? So you could probably draw a very light in pencil dotted line if you wanted to between, the cause of why they were doing that. So it really does behoove all of us at all levels that are in doing this work, from the federal level right on down to the local level in the communities and on campuses, to continue to promote the message that the non-medical use of a prescription stimulant does not help you get a better grade. And I always make that distinction that absolutely, if you are clinically diagnosed and prescribed a prescription stimulant, that it absolutely does help you with your concentration and your focus. Again, I'm talking about the non-medical use of a prescription stimulant. So I'm going to come back to this issue in a moment when I talk about fake pills. Okay, so that's prescription drug misuse. And then on the next slide, I bring up the mental health data. These data come from American College Health Association and their National College Health Assessment, the spring 2023 cohort. And I always focus in on not only the numbers, but the words when I talk about, these stats. So anytime within the last month, 35% of college students felt things were hopeless. And think about the weight of that word, hopeless. Almost 25% of students felt worthless. Again, think of the weight of that word, and almost 25% of college students felt that way in the past 30 days. In the past year, almost 35% of students felt anxiety affected their academic performance. And the suicide numbers, those are slight upticks from the previous semester, fall 2022's data. 3% of college students likely to attempt suicide someday, and just over 2% attempted suicide within the last 12 months. It wasn't until, during my time at CSAP, working with colleagues in SAMHSA's Center for Mental Health Services, and specifically their suicide prevention branch. If any of you have or are familiar with the Garrett Lee Smith suicide prevention grants, that's the center out of which those were managed. And, we talked about the alignment between substance use and mental health. When I talk to health center directors and counseling center directors on campuses around the country, they'll talk about the students who come into the centers and talk about their alcohol and other drug misuse is causing them to feel anxious or depressed. And yet they'll also say they're feeling anxious or depressed because of their alcohol or other drug misuse. So there's this, what I call a kind of a bi-directional influence, if you will, between the two. So I think it really is important for us to acknowledge and recognize the alignment, the connection, if you will, between mental health and drug use. Okay, those are the data points. Now I'm going to pivot a bit and talk about what really is um, just absolutely clear. Oh, no, I keep forgetting, Amy, we got these chat box questions in here too. And Nikki, I see your question. The presentation be available after the meeting. Yes, I've shared the PowerPoint with Amy. Absolutely can share the PowerPoint. Not only the PowerPoint will be shared with you, but we're also recording this so that it will be available as well. But throw in the chat box. This isn't a poll. Just go ahead and put it in the chat box. I'm going to pull that up. What stands out to you in the data that I just shared? And I know it was a bit to kind of throw at you all at once, but as I said, I think it's important to do that snapshot, if you will, of the data. But just go ahead and ad lib, spontaneous, just pop in the chat box. What stands out to you in the data that I just shared?
And Rich, I don't know if you can see, but we did have two people in the poll, say fake drugs is a concern or a thing that stands out, and that the information you shared makes a lot of sense.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Mhm.
Appreciate that. And that's where we're going to pivot right now into the fake pill issue. So feel free throughout just to continue to put your comments in the chat box with anything that I'm sharing. But let's pivot now into that conversation now. So the drug overdose crisis is a clear and present public safety, public health, and national security threat. And let's see, Amy, if you want to go to the next slide, you'll be able to see. We're going to start talking about this issue here. Yeah. DEA, we're doing everything that we can to keep these dangerous and deadly drugs out of your community, but we do need your help. My boss always talks about our stakeholders as being force multipliers, and that's how I hope you will, work to get this information out to your various and respective stakeholders in the parts of South Carolina that you are. As I've said, I've been in this field, my entire career has been at the government level in my home state of New York, working for the state government there, to starting my federal career at the U.S. Department of Education in the Office of Safe and Drug-Free Schools, and then at CSAP, and now at DEA. Throughout that entire 30 plus years, it's been in the prevention space, working to prevent alcohol and other drug misuse among youth and young adults with a particular emphasis on college students. And I will always, talk about the need to prevent alcohol use among those under the age of 21. I will always talk about the need to prevent cannabis use. Whether you're in a legalized state or not, even in the legalized, it keeps using the air quotes, states under the age of 21, it's illegal, right? And federally, it continues to be an illegal substance. So I will always focus on that, as all of the other illicit drugs. But in all that time, the fake pill and illicit fentanyl issue really has changed the landscape. Our administrator, and Milgram, talks about the need for us as an agency to meet this moment in time. And it really is a significant moment in time that has been unlike anything that we've ever seen. On the next slide, you'll see just some of the headlines that crop up across the country. And I'm sure you've seen similar, headlines in your communities and on your campus. Here's another data point for you on the next slide. We know that in the past year, there were more than 110,000 drug overdose deaths. Approximately 2/3 of those involved synthetic opioids, primarily fentanyl. The other 1/3 were primarily related to psychostimulants, primarily meth. And so, that is a number that none of us should be happy with. It continues to go up. And so this is a number that we really are trying to drive down. The next slide, you'll see that, in 2022, DEA seized more than 58 million fake pills, often laced with fentanyl. That is more than double the amount that was seized in 2021. And, the data point there speaks for itself. That's enough really to kill every American. If you go to dea.gov on our homepage now, there is a counter that shows you in real time the quantities of fentanyl pills, fake pills that are being seized, as well as the number of pounds of fentanyl powder that has been seized so far this year. And at last check, it's over 64 million, if I'm not mistaken. And I just, the counter has been moving pretty quickly. So that's a new tool that you can see. Again, it's on the homepage of dea.gov. So how much is a lethal amount? It's 2 milligrams. And if you haven't seen the graphic of what, is a lethal amount, it's this. It's enough to fit on the tip of a pencil. This is what's considered to be a lethal dose. We know that fentanyl is approximately 50 times more potent than heroin. It's about 100 times more potent than morphine. And the fentanyl that's driving this crisis isn't just sold in fake pills. The dealers are mixing fentanyl with other illicit drugs to make their product go further and to increase their profits. And I will get out in front of the question that is often asked, which is, aren't the dealers concerned about killing off their customers? And the answer is no, considering that the bottom line for the dealers is profit. It's the dollars. And we've known in our country for quite some time that there is a demand for drugs. And so the killing off of 110,000 Americans, the dealers aren't so concerned about that because they know there is a whole other wave coming in behind them. Really, they're looking to, addict because of the highly addictive nature of these drugs. But with fentanyl being pressed into these, it's not the concern that the individuals are being killed off because, again, they know they've got a whole wave of others coming in behind them. So that's just a sad fact of the situation. The next slide, I talk about our public safety alerts. We do not issue these lightly or often. In fact, since 2015, we've only issued 3. And 2015 was our first public safety alert around fentanyl. And that's when fentanyl was first coming on the scene as a drug of concern. And then in September of 2021, that was when we actually launched the One Pill Can Kill campaign, which I'll reference in just a moment. That's when we were warning the public about the alarming increase in both the lethality, that 2 milligrams, and the availability of fake prescription pills containing fentanyl and meth. And then in November of 2022, which seems like forever ago, now that we're already into February of 2024. How does that happen? But in November of 2022, we issued the latest public safety alert to warn the public of a sharp national increase, again, in the lethality of fentanyl-laced fake prescription pills. I'm going to show you the One Pill website in just a moment, and you can actually see these and download these public safety alerts if you'd like. The next slide is another data point for you, another data point that's not going in the right direction. But our laboratory testing, we've got 9 labs around the country, has now revealed that about 7 out of 10 tested, pills that are tested by DEA containing fentanyl contain a potentially lethal dose. Last year, when I did this presentation for others, it was 6 out of 10. And my colleagues, the agents and others all around DEA. So now we're having to talk about this increase from 6 out of 10 to 7 out of 10. Again, these are the pills that we've tested, the ones that have been seized with fentanyl containing a potentially lethal dose. On the next slide, I mentioned the lethality, the increase in the lethality of these fake pills. Just 6 years ago, the average fentanyl dose in these tablets was 1.6 milligrams, and now you'll see it's up at 2.4, almost 2.5. Actually, if we rounded out the digits even further. And so that's the average fentanyl dose that is being seen in these pills. And you got to remember, there's no regulation on these pills. Fentanyl is literally being added to other products, and it's being mixed up and it's pressed into pills. And so I always use the analogy of, like, for those of you online who like to bake, and you have a favorite cookie, but we always eat chocolate chip cookies. You think about, the mixture of the batter and such. And as much as you mix and try to get, evenly mixture of chocolate chips, ultimately when they bake, some cookies have more chocolate chips than others. And that's really kind of the same analogy when it comes to these pills that are being pressed. There's no telling if a pill has, a trace amount, if it has a lethal dose, or if it has twice the lethal dose of fentanyl in it. Again, that's what's so scary about this. The next slide shows you some of the more common fake pills, the ones you might be thinking about because they're popular: Oxy, Addies, and Xanax. These are the most common fake pills that are being made to look like prescription opioids. And these fake pills are widely accessible. They're often sold on social media and on e-commerce platforms. And so anybody who has one of these, right, smartphone, anybody who's got a phone, that's where they're accessible now. Our administrator and others, we talk about the internet. We've been saying this for a while, but even now more so than ever because of how the pills are being acquired and such online, that drug trafficking really, the online has become like the super highway, if you will, of drug trafficking. And it's really scary, especially when we talk about access and availability, because that's what we do in prevention, especially when we've been talking about like alcohol and cannabis. We're always trying to prevent access and availability. That's a couple of the cornerstones of prevention efforts. And now we have to worry about that. It's the same principle when we're talking about fake bills. So I'm going to do a quick pop quiz. Amy, if you want to click to the next slide. Here are 2 photos. I'm not going to reveal the answer just yet. But which of these pills, the 2 on the top or the 2 on the bottom, which ones do you think is the fake oxycodone? I'm not going to hum the 30-second Jeopardy think music. We're not going to take too much time, but if you just lock in your mind your answer, and then Amy, if you want to reveal the answer, you'll see that the fake oxy are the 2 pills on the bottom. It typically trips people up because they look cleaner and crisper. It's not the case with these particular photos. And, we have chemists and agents and others who have been doing this work for a long time. And even they can't discern which is the real, which is the fake. We'll do one more on the next slide. We won't show you the answer, but this is Xanax. So which pill do you think is the real Xanax, not the fake one? Which one do you think is the real one? And again, just in your mind, I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it. Amy, go ahead and you can reveal the answer. The real Xanax is the one on top. And again, here you got a color differentiation, but the differentiation, you've got the lines that almost mimic what a real Xanax looks like as well. So, medical grade fentanyl is made in a clean and controlled lab. And on the next slide, you'll see what I'm talking about. There are strict regulations, and this fentanyl is taken in hospitals. There is a legitimate use of fentanyl in nursing homes, of course, under strict medical care. But we aren't talking about medical grade fentanyl. We're talking about illicit fentanyl, and that's made in places like what you're going to see on the next slide, which are jungles, the warehouses, and garages. There's no quality control in these operations. There's also no regard for human lives. There's no telling how much fentanyl, as I mentioned before, will end up in one pill. And this is an actual photo of, a clan lab, as a clandestine, as we call them. But again, this is what we're looking at in terms of an illicit fentanyl laboratory. As I mentioned, access being an additional threat on the next slide. Social media sites that are popular with youth, young adults, and adults. I don't want to just cornerstone this into the youth and young adults. The social media sites where we share our stories, we share our pictures, right? They've also become popular platforms for drug trafficking organizations who use these sites to sell their illicit drugs. And if you've been in the prevention field for a while, you know that we're always playing catch up. It always feels that way, that we're just always a step behind. And the next slide will depict that because now there's a whole other language that we have to be concerned about, and that's the emoji codes. Drug traffickers and those seeking these drugs are using a whole language of emojis on social media to communicate about selling and buying these drugs. DEA is working with social media, internet companies to provide information that will help them better understand how dangerous drug traffickers are operating in their space. We do have a fact sheet that outlines these codes. Again, it's going to be on the One Pill site, and that's a good segue to the next slide. DEA.gov/OnePill. If you go to the partners toolbox on the website, that is where you will find the public safety alerts that I had mentioned earlier. But in the partners toolbox, there are graphics, social media graphics, other information that the fact sheet for parents and other caregivers, the emoji codes, the general One Pill Can Kill fact sheet. We encourage you, download this information. There is no cost. It's in the public domain. You can tailor it to your own campus, if you want to Gamecocks on it and use your resources or what have you, or if it's in, a community coalition, whether you're a drug-free communities grant supported coalition or not, download this information. That's how you are a force multiplier, as I mentioned earlier on. What I want to mention about One Pill Can Kill is I continue to stress this universal message. And the reason I say it's universal is because it doesn't matter what audience you're talking to, whether it's Elementary school students, unfortunately, it's never too early to be talking about this issue. We always can talk about good medicine, bad medicine. Middle school students, high school students, college students, young people in youth, young people in the military, in the workplace, middle-aged adults, older adults, right? Where we talk about mixing pills with alcohol and such like that. That universal message is this: never take medicine that wasn't prescribed for you by a licensed medical provider and dispensed by a trusted pharmacy. Again, never take a pill that wasn't prescribed for you by a licensed medical provider and dispensed through a trusted pharmacy. And Snapchat is not a trusted pharmacy. And unfortunately, and I'm not calling just them out, there are other instances of other social media platforms. But you can Google it. There are lawsuits out there against some of these companies, and there is no way to uh, buy legitimate pills through these websites as people think there are. But that's the issue, and that's why I want to tie it back to what I was mentioning before about college students and the non-medical use of prescription stimulants. So the hypothetical example I use is a college student. I always say Johnny or Jane um, has a test coming up, and they mention it to their roommate, and the roommate says, "Well, if you let me get you an Adderall, an Addy, you got this test coming up. You'll stay up longer. You're gonna be able to cram better. You'll do much better on your test. Let me get you an Addy." And the student thinks about it. And they're not really sure, and they say, "Well, okay, what can one pill hurt, right?" But what they don't know is the roommate talks to somebody who talks to somebody who talks to somebody who talks to somebody who gets that pill from a dealer, not from your trusted pharmacy. That pill makes its way back to Johnny or Jane, who takes the pill. Unfortunately, it's got that lethal dose of fentanyl in it. And next thing you know, the phone call is being made to the next of kin. And I don't bring that up as a scare tactic. There are times that we get accused of scare tactics and they don't work. And I always push back and say, look, I've got 30 plus years in this business, and I know all about the prevention science and that scare tactics don't work. And this isn't a scare tactic. What we are presenting here are facts that are scary. The 7 out of 10 is a fact. The more than 2 milligrams in these pills is a fact. And I've had conversations, very tough conversations over the last couple of years, online and in person, with moms and dads of college students who are no longer with them because they thought they were taking a Percocet or they thought they were taking an Addy. And it's never ever an easy conversation. It's a part of the job I absolutely hate. I've had those conversations, unfortunately, before across my entire career, whether you're dealing with an alcohol poisoning or a drug overdose, or a drug poisoning, if you will, with fake pills. So we continue to push home the messages and know the dangers and the accessibility of these drugs online and their lethality. So I encourage you to go to the website and check it out. The next few slides, I want to show you some examples of some college campuses who have taken the one pill can kill messaging and have run with it and adopted it, which we're very happy about. And this was when One Pill Can Kill launched in September of 2021. So I have just four quick examples to show you. First example is Auburn University, and this was on their Insta page. And a lot of these were student developed, student driven. When the press release had come out and we were launching One Pill Can Kill, Auburn took information from the press release, actually including a quote from Administrator Milgram, which isn't in this graphic here, but I know it was on the Insta quote that went out across their platform, using the information from the press release to start to get the message out. And so that was great to see that. The next slide is the University at Albany, alma mater, full disclosure. But if any of you know Dr. Dolores Cimini, she's a real, she's a titan. It's a word I don't use lightly in our field. I've known Dolores for many, many years. She was one of the early adopters in getting this information out across her campus to students, faculty, and staff. They were getting information out about fake pills, fentanyl-laced cannabis, which I will tell you, our labs have not seen any indication in all the drugs that we've seized of seeing fentanyl-laced cannabis, but that's because we're mass quantity seizures. We're not seeing like individual low level quantities. So I don't discount what people might be seeing at the local level on campus in the communities if they're hearing about or seeing fentanyl laced cannabis. I'm just telling you the labs haven't seen it, but I can tell you I have been hearing about it, say from your colleagues around the country. University of Albany also took all this information and they blew them up and put them on their bus shelters all around campus with QR codes so people could click on the QR codes and get resources for help. The next slide is a little bit of the wow factor. The University of Central Florida, working with a local coalition, the Orange County Drug-Free Coalition, whose director is Tom Hall, also a longtime colleague of mine. He was at University of Central Florida with a grant that they had from us at Department of Ed when I was there. So through this collaboration between UCF and the Drug-Free Coalition, they got some money to wrap the police force on campus's vehicles in a one kill message. And because imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, we'll tell you that some of DEA's field divisions now, including headquarters, have now some of their cars wrapped in the one pill can kill message. I will tell you, you bring in the helicopters, the canines, and now the cars. That's the attention grabber. Once you've grabbed people's attentions, that's when you can start to have the conversation about the content, behind what's being advertised. Very quickly on the last slide, this is the University of Virginia. Susie Bruce and her folks there in the Gordy Center at UVA. This was again developed by their students and pushed out across their social media platforms. Again, talking about one pill can kill. So if you know of campuses, whether it's your own or others, who are doing something specific around one pill can kill or fake pills, go to campusdrugprevention.gov/one pill. There's a link on there for you to tell us about it. We'd love to highlight what you're doing around one pill can kill so that others can learn about this and maybe implement something similar on their campus. Okay, so I'm going to wind up the presentation talking about our outreach to colleges and universities and what resources are available to you. The 18 to 25 age group has some of the highest rates of drug use, some of the lowest rates of seeking help. And we know college students make up a significant portion of that age group. And so DEA is filling a gap in the prevention landscape with our materials, and they are all based in the strategic prevention framework. And so we have another poll for you to take. What is your current experience with the strategic prevention framework, or the SPIF as it's referred to? Never heard of it, you have heard of it, but you haven't used it, you have heard of it, but you only use it occasionally, or you know what, you're all in, you use it regularly to support your prevention efforts. So if you could quickly answer that for us, we'd be interested to hear about your current experience with the SPIF.
Rich, I figured out where we messed it up.
Oh, what?
This is I guess where people answered it before.
Oh, well, okay, that's all right.
So.
That's okay. And I'm okay with that because it wasn't like a big reveal. It wasn't like a spoiler alert. All right, but here's interesting. And if people did answer before, I guess they maybe could still hear. But what I'm seeing is that it's kind of 50-50. But people have heard of it. The question is whether or not they're using it, and how often are they using it. I'm just going to put it right out there. You should be using it, and you should be using it regularly. And I know there are challenges with steps of the SPIF, and there are ways to overcome those challenges. And you can, learn from your colleagues both within the state and across the country on how others have overcome those challenges. But the strategic prevention framework really is your roadmap. So let's talk about how we incorporate the SPIF in our work. Here's the SPIF flower that's been around forever. The SPIF, for those of you who don't know about it, it's a 5-step planning process. It's been around for the better part of a quarter of a century plus. It starts with assessment, works its way all the way around to evaluation. It has 2 underlying foundations: sustainability and cultural competence, and include in that cultural humility. The next slide shows you the SPIF, but just depicted a little bit differently. And the SPIF answers these 5 questions. What's the problem? What do I have to work with? What should I do? How should I do it? How do I put my plan in action? And is my plan succeeding? That's the SPIF right there, from assessment to capacity building to planning, implementation, and ultimately evaluation. So the next slide tells you really why you should be using the SPIF. It's data driven. I mentioned it earlier. Data drives programming. We know in prevention that good decisions require data. The SPIF also is a dynamic, iterative process. You know, the flower, some people like the depiction, others don't. I like the new graphic that we kind of have out there just because it's something different that people can relate to with the 5 questions. But the SPIF is not a 5-step process that you do at step 1 assessment and end at step 5 evaluation and then say, I'm done. Instead, you know, it basically takes you on your journey through evaluation. And with your evaluation, you may see that your efforts aren't getting you exactly what you wanted, or they did, and now you want to try it with a new population on campus. That doesn't mean you're going to necessarily go back to assessment. It might take you back to the capacity building phase, right? So it's really this circular, think of it as a living document, living process. And then lastly, the SPIF does rely on, and it encourages a team approach. We know that the work that we do in prevention is complex, and it cannot be done by just any one individual or organization. So when we were thinking about what resource can DEA develop, aside from our real flagship resource that we launched in July of 2017, our website, I'll mention that in a moment, I talked to your peers all around the country saying, what is it that you need? And by and large, we heard about the website and we heard about the need for a planning guide, something that focuses in on how to do prevention. I hesitate to use the word right, but definitely how do you do prevention strategically? And of course, that led me back to the SPIF. I mean, my mentor is former CSEP director Fran Harding. I grew up learning the SPIF in my home state of New York with the work that I did. So I kept coming back to the SPIF. And I knew that there wasn't anything that was out there that aligned the SPIF with prevention on college campuses. And so we filled a gap. And the next slide, you'll see the cover of the updated version. We initially launched this in January of 2020, and we were very happy with the reception that it received then. We launched it at the NASPA Strategies Conference in New Orleans. Little did any of us know that 8 weeks after we launched this, all of our worlds would be turned upside down by COVID. But the document remained useful to people as they worked through prevention, even during the pandemic. And then when we decided last year that it was time to update the guide, we started thinking about, well, what do we need to update? And so we kept it to 8 chapters with these helpful graphics. There are 2 versions. There is a print version. So you'll see my email address at the end of this presentation. So if you want a single copy, print copy, or if you want bulk copies to send to your stakeholders within a task force or a coalition, and Amy, I give that offer to you. If you want bulk copies, I can send them to you if you want to send out across the state. So there is the print version. Then the online version, which you get to through campusdrugprevention.gov, is about 70 pages longer. And that's because the online version has all of the worksheets and the tips and the tools that are associated with each of the steps of the SPIF. But what's new in the 2024 edition? We updated all the data. There were 86 data points, whether it was a statistic or factual information that was cited, that our contractor, EDC, needed to decide, do we keep it, do we revise it, do we ditch it? So there was a whole process for that. Also new in the new guide, the SPIF profiles in action. I mentioned there are certain successes and challenges with each step of the SPIF. Throughout the guide, we have highlighted campuses across the country and how they are using the SPIF. And so there are specific profiles in there for you to take and use. And if you need to get in touch with somebody to learn more about what they were doing on their campus, I'm happy to help make that warm handoff and introduction for you. Also in the guide, integrating culture throughout the SPIF. In addition to the SPIF, we have 10 brief supplements. You'll see a slide on that in just a moment. And we developed those supplements for specific stakeholders on campus, whether it's faculty members or for health and counseling center directors, for the college president and other senior administrators. There's also a supplement that focuses on integrating culture across all steps of the SPIF. Well, with the guide proper, I really wanted to have that integrated throughout, so it didn't seem like a standalone adjunct piece. That integrating culture really needed to be integrated throughout all steps of the SPIF and therefore integrated all throughout the guide. So that's there. And then lastly, very excited about this because again, filling the gap, something that's not out there. Our new chapter 8 focuses on prevention success during times of disruption. We focus in on 5 types of disruption. Outbreaks of disease is one, certainly like COVID. We talk about natural disasters. You're along the eastern seaboard as well, so maybe you're not directly related or affected by hurricane season as, say, your friends in the Gulf Coast. But certainly, I'm sure there are times. And it doesn't have to be just be hurricanes. Certainly, Tornado Alley and tornado outbreaks, severe storms, if that does damages to campus. Turnovers in leadership, mass resignations, all of which were, campuses were not immune to that in 2020 as a result of the pandemic. So out of, what were the lessons learned during times of disruption? And our contractor had a multitude of interviews with people around the country, and they identified 5 specific strategies for success. And those are outlined in the new guide. Very proud of that. The next few slides are other resources. These are the campus-specific fact cards that we have. Might be looking to develop 1 or 2 over the next year or so on a couple of other topics, but for now we have zeroed in on cannabis use, prescription drug misuse, and over the last year we launched the one on impaired driving among college students because unfortunately that is on the rise. The next slide shows you a snapshot of our flagship resource, campusdrugprevention.gov. When I talked to your peers around the country, they said what they need is a one-stop shop for all things drugs, all things related to campus. And we launched this in 2017. A couple of quick features to mention. The podcast series that I'm honored to host each month with guests at the federal, national, state, and local level, centering the interview around 5 specific questions. So you can check that out under the resources section. The next slide is just, again, I reiterate the guide that we have. The next slide shows you a snapshot of the 10 current supplements, as I mentioned, for different stakeholders on campus. These are anywhere from 4 to 12 pages. So if you're working with student-led organizations, you might want to pick up that and give it a read. If you're trying to get connected with your VP for student affairs or your president, and there's also information in there for how the president can get more involved. You might want to check that one out. So we have about 2 or 3 or more of these being developed over the next few months, and we expect to have those finished up by April. So be on the lookout for those. And then the next slide is highlighting our Red Ribbon Week Campus Video PSA contest. We do this each year. We just wrapped up our 8th annual one in collaboration with our partners at CSAP. If you go to the homepage right now of campusdrugprevention.gov, you'll see our 3 winners, first, second, and third place that we announced 2 weeks ago in San Francisco at the Strategies Conference. Here's where I want to end up on the next slide. Another one of my sound bites. Prevention is not random. Prevention, it has to be intentional, it has to be purposeful, and it has to be strategic. And Amy, you can click through those 3 and they'll show up on the screen so people can see that information. If you're randomly doing prevention or if your efforts are haphazard and random, not following a strategic planning process like the SPIF, you should not be surprised that the efforts are not ending the way that you would hope that they would. And so that's why we really hope that you use this guide. And early indications that I'm hearing from people now, and like I said, it's only been out on the street for a couple of weeks. People are very impressed with the update, We've kept the real guts of the spiff and everything else, and then what we've added, it's really made it a really stellar resource for people to use. The last slide is my contact information. As I said, never hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions, if I can help make connections for you with others, again, around the country and your peers. Certainly you have a great champion in Amy and the work that she does. And that's why I invited our community outreach specialist, Wanda, on from the Atlanta Field Division. We always try to make connections with your local DEA. And so, you know, if you're looking for an agent or others to come on campus or into communities to talk about the drug trends that are happening across the state or in a particular part of the state, you know, based on their availability, they would absolutely love to do that. Again, if you want any of the publications in single copy or bulk, drop me an email. Happy to get that information out for you. So with that, I will stop. And Amy, I'll see if we had any particular questions. Oh, you're on mute.
There we go.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the information and the just all the resources that you all offer, because it's, you know, incredibly helpful. And I know we're out of time.
I did see a quick question. Let me get Julia's question real quick, because I think it's important. How do you envision peer educators being involved?
Yeah.
So this is the kind of information, everybody has a role in this, and we know that peers listen to peers. Peers also listen to, you know, they still listen to their parents, whether you think that they do or not. Parents are still a trusted source. Health centers and counseling centers are still a trusted source. But peers, by and large, you know, we get this information out into the hands of peers. You know, their role really is immeasurable in getting this out, because they're seeing them in the locker rooms, on the fields, in the fraternities and sororities, in the club sports, in the clubs, period. You know, so thank you, Julia, for answering, for asking that question. And that's why we always cite our sources, because we know that students also love to question the data. So do adults. But, you know, we always cite that information for folks. So please encourage your students to use this information to get it out to their peers as well.
Well, and I love, you know, your example from Auburn is a great example of taking the resources and then giving it to students and saying, okay, make this something you would notice or look at or believe. And so it's a great way to take some of the resources that y'all have and turn it into something and involve the students and the peer educators. So great.
My most recent podcast, which just dropped yesterday online, my interview is with the 3 winners of this year's last fall's contest. And most, if not all 3 of the winners were developed with student input and by students. And I specifically asked them, because this question has come up to me, not by campuses, but by colleagues within the federal government. Are PSAs really a viable method of getting information out to students? And every one of the winners had said yes. And the students had said the reason they said yes is because they were curious about it. And they were not necessarily sure what PSAs, you know, the development of them are, but they researched it and they found it as a real good challenge to them. And hopefully you'll enjoy, and you'll see why the 3 campuses that were selected were, because of the work that was done. So again, power of peers, absolutely.
Yeah. No, they were great videos this year. I think the quality was really great.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank you, Rich, for taking the time to share
Absolutely.
all this information with us. We really appreciate you, and we will be back together the first week in March for our next meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Be safe and be well.